Okay, this is how to build a boat the Lowell's Boat Shop way. I'm Graham McKay, the Executive Director at Lowell's Boat Shop. And if you've been watching our videos, you have seen us building a couple of Mohonk Skiffs here. And we don't have plans for this kind of thing. We have notes and patterns. And so we have a set of notes like this for each of our boats. This is actually as much information as you're ever going to get for one of our boats. And the reason being, we have built I would say dozens of these boats for Mohonk Mountain House over the years, and they all sit next to each other, so they all want to look the same, and that's why there is as much information here as you'll ever find on one of our boats. A typical sheet full of notes. This is one that I made for a bank dory. Um, that's one for a surf dory. That's a little bit more like it. There's not a lot there if you're going to build a boat, but all of our boats all of our in-house design boats are all flat bottom, and they're built the same way. So when you start with a bottom. Here, it gives you the general specs, length overall, 15 feet. Used to be 15.2, but somebody crossed it out. Now it's 15.5 inch. But there's a Mohonk pattern, it says here. So you don't even have to worry about this. You can go to our little pile of patterns and find the bottom pattern for a Monhonk skiff, which we can go do in a minute if you want. But if you can't find that pattern, which is quite possible, you can lay it out here. It gives you the stations, the distance between, and a distance out from the center line. So you can lay out a center line, lay out your 30.5 inch between each station, come out the half breadth, bend a batten, and now you got yourself a bottom. Pretty straightforward. Tells you bottom is 7/8, and your length. They gave you your length already. Your is 12 feet. Sorry, I'm reading it upside down. 12 feet and a half inches. Your width of midships is 29 inches, and your width aft is 14 inches. Then it has, this usually comes later, but your rocker forward is 3.5, aft is 4. That's actually quite a bit of rocker, I would say, for one of these boats. And that means this bottom is curved fore and aft this way. So you're going to take the bow and bring it up 3.5 inches from the baseline, which is the building bed. And then the stern, you're going to bring up, I lost it here, 4 inches from the building bed. In the middle is going to touch the building bed, and that, when you spring that in, that's your rocker. Frames, they're going to be 7/8 inch oak, 30.5 inches apart. And then it says 14-foot OB skiff. So that means at some point they built a 14-foot outboard skiff and they developed a frame pattern for that. And so you're going to go over to our pile of frames on the wall. You're going to grab 14 OB skiff, and you're going to lay out a forward timber, a mid 1, a mid 2, and an aft timber. And this gives you a little bit of spec on that. Lengths. It even gives you a bevel to put on the bottom so that these frames are canted out from center, so that when you bend the rocker in it, they actually come back up to plumb. And then the transom. It gives you 1-inch mahogany, gives you a rough height of 21.25, a rough width of 36. So you need exact, or roughly that much width and that much height on it. Flare, 38 degrees. So the flare is this angle that runs out from the bottom up the side, at least for the garboard anyway. Out from the bottom, up from the side. There's your flare. And then it gives you the rake, 30 degrees, which is the angle that the transom is tipped back, is 30. And then it gives you a crown, 10-foot tender, new pattern. So that means we actually have crown patterns for the shape of the top of the stem over on the wall. So that's what you're going to use for that curve. And again, these boats are meant to all look the same. If I were building one of our other designs, this information wouldn't necessarily be there. I'd have to figure out what pattern I wanted to use, and that would have been to my eye. And to that end, when I see boats that were built here in the 70s and 80s and even 90s, I can tell who built them, usually from the little details like that. Stem type. skiff, 12-foot OB. So now we're back to that outboard skiff again. We're going to go find the stem pattern for that, which hangs on the wall over there. It's got a rough length of 36, a rough cut of 30. So that rough cut of 30, and again, we're going through a lot of information. You come up 30 inches from the bottom and you make your first cut, and that is going to be your bevel for your planks to that point, and then you custom fit the shear plank when you go to put that on. So 30 inches is going to leave you below the shear a little bit. Planking, 9/16 cedar. Well, that's high hopes. Can't find cedar like that anymore, so we're making it out of pine. 1-inch laps, 24-inch gain. Lining. Now, this is the magic. This little guy here is our lining for middle aft. You get all these numbers. Then you have plywood garboard, a whole different set of numbers. In our case, we're using a plywood garboard. And so if we take our little yardstick here, we should be able to read plywood garboard, 9 inches, and that's forward. So this right here should be 9 inches up from the bottom. If we go to the middle part of the boat, 5 1/4, this measurement here should be, fingers crossed, 5 1/4. And then if we go aft, 6 1/2. I'm going to presume John did it right because he's good like that. 6 1/2. So then that gets you 3 points to make the top edge of your garboard. The bottom edge is determined by tracing the bottom of the boat. Your next plank comes up, it overlaps everything. You trace the top of your garboard, and then you just add. So in this case, the next plank's 4 1/2 inches wide up forward. I'm going to add 9 and 4 1/2. It's going to get me 13 1/2. Lo and behold, 13 1/2. Sticking with the same one, another 4 1/2 would get me to 17 18 inches. 17 1/2, I hope. And 4 1/2, 4 1/2, 9 9. So this one ended up a little bit low, but that's not a big deal. Actually, it didn't if you put it at the proper angle. But that doesn't matter because that's why I add to the previous number so that it's self-correcting all the way up. And then when you get to the shear, you get your 3 points. And you always try your shear line out a couple of times before you actually make it so to make sure that it actually looks good on the boat. So now you've got your boat all planked up. Pretty easy. There's a whole mishigas of timber cuts here, and we've sort of gone through that, and I'm not going to go through that again. Just because in this particular boat, it's quite complicated. And then it gives you a whole bunch of information here on how to do the rails, how to do the rowing blocks, the risers, and all that kind of stuff. Again, that stuff typically does not exist on these. It's just so these boats all look the same. But the general gist of how to build these boats is all in those notes right there. And so in the case of our 18 surf dory, we would know that the bottom was 13 feet long and 30 inches wide. It's really all you need to know because it's football shaped. So at 6 1/2 feet, you come out 15 inches on either side, and there you got your shape of your bottom. Your stem is the big dory stem. Your timbers are 18-foot swamp. You've got 5 of them. Just follow the patterns, and there you go. A couple of measurements for your transom. Got your rocker. Now your frame's all set up. Here's your lining for your planking. If you follow that, now you're all planked up. And the only thing that leaves you is some information for the risers. Everything else you kind of have to make up on your own. But that gives you essentially the hull, and then you kind of go from there. So a super simplified way of building these boats. It works because we do have patterns. We have patterns that don't have notes, and we have some notes that don't have patterns, and that's unfortunate. We have historic patterns in the collection in the attic for which we don't have any notes. We have some sticks that correspond, but unfortunately, the Rosetta Stone for all of that would have been an old boat builder who had built 100 of these boats, and they're no longer here, which is really unfortunate. One of the benefits of doing this way is that the process is extraordinarily malleable. So If I want to make this boat a foot longer, I can scale up this bottom and do the rest the same, and it all comes out and looks beautiful. So you can stretch boats, you can shrink boats, you can make them a little wider, a little bit narrower. And a lot of that is to the customer's orders and what they really want. Sometimes with the timber cuts, I'll alter those a little bit. If it's going to be a sailboat, sometimes I'll lay the planks out a little bit more so that it's a little beamier, a little bit rounded. If it's going to be a rowboat, sometimes I'll stand them up a little bit so that the spread of the oars ends up being an ideal width, that kind of thing. But a lot of that's left to the builder, and a lot of this information is guidance. But you can kind of mess with it as you wish. So oftentimes what you'll find are a lot of these things are crossed out, rewritten by somebody else as they saw fit, and that's given me the freedom to kind of mess with this stuff as well. But I would say of the dozens of boats that I have built or scores of boats that I have built, I guess, over the years, there's a handful of ones that I've actually followed the exact numbers for. So there you go. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll try to answer. If you would like to know more about this, I teach classes doing this here at Lowell's Boat Shop. I also teach classes up at the Wooden Boat School in Brooklyn, Maine. And I do teach this process. And if you can do this, then you can definitely build a boat from plans and all that. So thanks for watching, and ask us questions. Lap depth 60% off. I don't even know. Oh, I know what that means. That means, well, we're getting into the weeds there.